Have you ever stopped to think about what it takes to run the world's largest election? Seriously, we're talking about an event with almost a billion eligible voters. Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain and demystify just how India, the world's most populous democracy, actually pulls off this incredible festival of voting. Right from the very beginning, India made this huge bet, a bet on its own people. This quote really captures that spirit. Just think about how wild this was back in 1949. To decide to give every single adult the power to vote, based purely on an abundant faith in the common man, it was a massive, bold experiment. So, what was the big idea behind this experiment? What was the engine that powered it? Well, it all boils down to one simple but incredibly powerful concept. Universal adult franchise. It's the promise at the heart of India's constitution. And what it means is that your vote is worth exactly the same as everyone else's. It doesn't matter if you're a farmer in a tiny village or a CEO in a massive city. One person, one vote. Every single one having equal value. And to really get how huge this change was, just look at this comparison. Before independence, voting was a privilege reserved for a tiny elite. Just 13% of the population, based on how wealthy or educated you were. Then, practically overnight, India turned that on its head and made it a fundamental right for every single citizen over 18. That's not just an evolution, that was a full-blown democratic revolution. Okay, so how on earth does a system this massive actually work in practice? Well, to understand the giant, sometimes it helps to look at something much, much smaller. Let's shrink it down. Let's just imagine a simple election for a class representative. You've got your candidates, you've got your voters, the students, and you have a clear goal. Pick one person to represent the whole class. Turns out, the basic building blocks are exactly the same. So first, you have campaigning, right? Candidates make their promises. Then, the students vote using a secret ballot so nobody feels pressured. After that, the votes are counted fairly, maybe with a teacher watching. And finally, whoever gets the most votes wins. These 4 simple steps, well, that's the DNA of any democratic election. All right, you got that simple classroom model? Now, let's take it and scale it up. I mean, way, way up. So forget a classroom of 30 kids. For India's general election, we are talking about nearly 980 million eligible voters. To put that into perspective for you, that is more than the entire population of North America and Europe combined. Just let that sink in. So how do you even begin to serve that many voters? You do it by setting up over 1 million polling stations. They're everywhere, in cities, in remote mountains, sometimes even for a single voter living in the middle of a forest. The logistics are just mind-boggling. And all those voters aren't just choosing one single leader. Nope. The country is divided up into 543 different areas, or constituencies, and each one of those elects its own representative to the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of India's parliament. So who's the referee in this giant game? Who manages this whole colossal task? That would be the Election Commission of India, or the ECI. It's a completely independent body whose one and only job is to make sure these massive elections are free, fair, and run smoothly. And that right there brings us to maybe the most important question of all. With so much at stake, how do you keep the world's biggest election from becoming the world's biggest mess? I mean, really, how do you make sure that every single candidate from every single party is playing by the exact same set of rules? How do you guarantee that it's a level playing field for everyone involved? Well, the answer lies in a really powerful rulebook called the Model Code of Conduct, or MCC for short. The second an election is announced, this code kicks in, and everybody, including the government that's currently in power, has to follow it to the letter. For instance, once the code is in effect, the ruling party can't just announce a splashy new government project to try and win votes. You can't use government cars or buildings for campaigning. Trying to influence voters with cash or gifts, that's a huge no-no. And you've got to keep the language civil. It's all about fairness. So, when it's your turn to vote, what actually happens? It's a pretty slick 4-step process. First, an officer finds your name on the list and checks your ID. Next, they put that famous indelible ink on your finger so you can't vote again. Another officer double-checks the ink. And then you step into the private booth and press a button on the electronic voting machine to cast your vote. Okay, so all the votes are in, millions and millions of them. What happens next? How do all those individual button pushes actually create a new government? First, let's quickly clear something up that confuses a lot of people: the difference between an MP and an MLA. You actually vote for both, but for different things. An MP is a member of parliament. They represent you on the national stage in Delhi, dealing with the big stuff like defense or foreign policy. An MLA is a member of the Legislative Assembly. They represent you in your state, focusing on local things like roads and schools. So in a direct election, you, the citizen, are the one voting directly for those MPs and MLAs. Simple enough. But there are also indirect elections. That's where the representatives you already elected, like your MLAs, then go on to vote for other officials, like members of the upper house of parliament, the Rajya Sabha, or even the president. So after all the votes from those 543 constituencies are counted, the math becomes pretty straightforward. The political party, or a coalition of parties, that wins a majority of those MP seats, that's 272 or more, gets to form the national government, and the leader of that winning party or coalition becomes the new prime minister. All right, we've talked about the system, the incredible scale, and the rules. But when you boil it all down, this entire massive structure of democracy ultimately rests on the shoulders of just one person. And let's be real, the system isn't perfect. It faces some serious challenges. The growing power and influence of money in politics is a huge one. So is the fact that a number of candidates have criminal records. And then there's voter apathy, where people, especially in big cities, just don't bother to show up and vote. So what's the ultimate defense against all of that? It's not just a commission or a rule book. The single most powerful safeguard for any democracy is an aware and vigilant voter. It's the person who asks the tough questions, who demands accountability, and who makes an informed choice in that voting booth. It's you. And really, that's the final question, isn't it? In our world today, what does it truly take to be that voter?